All right, good Monday morning, everybody, or I guess Monday afternoon at this point. I'm going to remind you tomorrow is an asynchronous learning day, meaning you will have a short assignment and an attendance question because juniors will be on campus testing for SATs. So there'll be no live Zoom meeting tomorrow. Use the time to make sure you catch up in our class, get ahead on some reading, get ahead in other classes, whatever you need. All right, so what I'd like for us to do is go back into our book clubs document. So sixth period, this is what yours looks like. Seventh period, you have your own. But I would like for you to go ahead and open up your Jamboard. And I want you to reply to people if you haven't done so already, or participate if you haven't had an opportunity. If your name is missing from the document, then that means you don't get credit for it. So you need to go in and make sure you add your name if you haven't done so already. So I should see the books that you guys are reading. I love how all of these people have their names on all of their sticky notes. And so at the end, I have Abby, who has been able to reply to Selah already, but then the rest of the people need to go back in and reply to people based off of this quote, okay? So it'd be really nice too that if you've already done it, you can go and see who might have been replying to you in this particular reading, okay? So let's go ahead and revisit this today if you haven't already, and make sure you reply to your group members. Okay, today we're going to move on to symbolism, and we're going to talk a little bit about what that looks like in different types of text, and then we're going to practice this with a clip from The Dark Knight Rises. So here are, clicking on this link, are some symbolism notes, particularly that with colors, because we're going to spend a lot of time with colors and lightness and darkness this week. So when writers make certain choices about personalities or setting or whatever, they do that in a lot of different ways. And so typically they'll do this symbolically through placement, through colors, through light and dark messages. And so I think this is really easy to talk about with visuals that you can think about. So like the color red can take on different meanings, right? We have red for love and romance, or, just like with Santa Claus, right? Like red is a predominantly familiar color. Then you have red here. This is with Cyborg from the Justice League. And typically with robots, you'll see a lot of like red laser looking lights and stuff like that. And so that could be passion, that could be anger. And then with violence as well, with the Red Skull from the Captain America movies, anything with red and violence is typical, right? You'll see it with like Marvel at all. Like, there's lots of different times where the screen, like you'll see from the director's cuts and stuff, they will amplify these kinds of colors to give off a particular mood. You also see it with green. Sometimes we see it with wealth or hope, or growth and life. But we also see it with jealousy and greed and wickedness. Then you also have different colors with black, like with the Punisher, right? And they take on different meanings depending upon the character. So having said that, in our lesson for today, I want you to watch this clip. It's just about 2.5 minutes. And if you've seen The Dark Knight Rises with Bane, right, he's a mercenary. He's like the villain in the movie. But he has come to destroy Gotham City. In this part, he really wants to break Batman. And they talk a little bit about darkness. And one of his famous lines is that you merely adopted the darkness. I was born into it. And if you know anything about Batman, he works at night, right? He has his two different personalities. So think about these, right? Where do you notice darkness being mentioned? How does Bane say darkness is different for him than it is for Batman? Think about the director, right? Look at where they're fighting. Where are there lights? Where are there no lights? And then based on what these characters say and do, what seems to be their philosophies. So pause this video really quick and take a moment and watch this if you haven't done it already, and I'll jump back on and talk you through it in just a second. Okay, so in this particular clip, you should have seen darkness when, we talk about the symbolic darkness within us, right? Where it's something negative, it's something that can cause violence, or it's, these heavy emotions. And Bane talks about how his whole life was in the literal dark, and what he thinks of lightness, right? And we're not just talking about like villains and heroes. We're talking about physical caves, and we're talking about black clothing and things like that, right? Like what does the light do versus what does the darkness do? And so for Bane, he's a complex character because yes, he's the villain, he's the mercenary, but he believes a certain thing about the world in which they live in. He believes that, that people are wrong and their selfish desires are wrong, and that's not what's going to be conducive to a positive world. Versus Batman feels like all villains who go against rules, as a vigilante, are people to be, taken out, right? And so Bane even talks about how he invented, or he created the Shadows, right, or the League of Shadows, um, and ultimately, it tells you right here, their mission was to rid the world of all greed and evil by any means necessary. And it's interesting how they both see each other in these different perspectives, and they're both right and they're both wrong. Batman shouldn't have to assume that he is the moral compass for the world, and Bane shouldn't feel like it's his responsibility. Nobody's in charge of that, and they're both wrong in that respect. But and they both work in the shadows, right? They don't bring these things to light, so to speak, symbolically speaking, and that's an issue. And so you really want to talk about the complexity within both of their characters and what they feel about, darkness versus lightness. So these are the two questions you want to respond to today. How does Bane say darkness is different for him than it is for Batman? Batman only pretends, right? He has all these gadgets and works in the evening, but he wasn't born into darkness. He was born into wealth and privilege. And that would be like symbolically lightness, right? He has to come down to the dark to do his work, versus Bane was born in this cave, right? And he kind of ascended from darkness to come to the light. And so they're kind of opposites in that way, even though they believe similar things. And so based on what the characters say and do in that scene, what seems to be their different philosophies or their views on life and the world around them? What things do they have in common versus things that they are incredibly misguided? And how would you know? Like, what specifically from the clip or even from the notes would tell you that? So you'll use the create tab and just respond to that. There's no sentence requirement or anything like that. Just make sure you complete it before midnight. And then tomorrow, you need to have this excerpt from Ember in the Ashes read for your attendance question and for your assignment. Remember, no Zoom meeting tomorrow. It is so good. The last sentence of the entire excerpt makes it all. I kind of want to pick up the book and read it. So I've started Children of Blood and Bone. I told you guys about that the other day. And I spent this entire weekend reading, and so I only have like this much left to go. And it's a pretty large book. I think it's about 500 pages, so I'm pretty proud of myself. Use the time to get caught up in your books if you guys need. And let me know if you have any questions, okay? Have a great Monday. Hopefully we'll see you on Zoom, but if not, make sure you do the attendance question and check in on the videos tomorrow. All right. Have a good one. Take care.